I want kids to appreciate the wonder in our world and that our environment doesn't actually stop at the top of the trees. It goes up into space and beyond, and people are living and exploring space. And it's a frontier, there's a lot of unknowns, and it's fascinating to see what scientists are doing. So I hope they take away that and maybe a little more respect for rats.
That's Joan Marie Galat, and I'm Dan Skinner. This is Conversations. Joan Marie Galat is an international award-winning author of more than 25 books of both fiction and nonfiction. Her STEM-themed books include Solve This, Wild and Wacky Challenges for the Genius Engineering You, Dot to Dot in the Sky, Stories of the Aurora, and Dark Matters, Nature's Reaction to Light Pollution. She joins us to talk about Mortimer, Rat Race to Space. Joan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us about the inspiration for this Rat Race to Space book, Mortimer.
Well, I had a couple of reasons why I wanted to write this book. One of them is I wanted to know myself, what is it like to live in outer space? What's it like to live on the International Space Station that's going around the Earth every 90 minutes in microgravity where everything floats? And also, I do a lot of school presentations, and the topic of space would come up because I'm talking about my astronomy books and my light pollution book. Kids did not know about the International Space Station. They didn't know that people have been living in space on a continuous basis since the year 2000. I wanted them to know about the amazing science going on overhead. Also, how space exploration benefits all of us.
So for what age group do you recommend this book?
The book is written for ages 9 to 12 or grades 4 to 7. So it's a middle grade novel. It's not written just for the kid who already likes outer space. It's a book that's written to hopefully encourage kids who don't know about space to discover what's going on up there. Kids who like space will definitely enjoy it. But kids who don't know about space might find that they are surprised to find science pretty engaging.
So tell us about the plot of this story.
Well, Mortimer is a journal-keeping lab rat, and he's tired of being treated like a rat. He's tired of, human perceptions of rats is generally not favorable. He's just tired of it. He lives at the lab in Houston at NASA, and he observes humans. And he's watching the ASCANs, which stands for astronaut candidates. That's what they're called. I didn't even invent that. That's what they're called. And he notices when he's observing them, he learns things about space. And he finds out it costs $10,000 to send every pound of weight up to the space station. And he sees that they're sending things like condiments, ketchup and mustard, and they're sending up underwear and things that rats just don't need. And he thinks rats should be the species to colonize Mars. He decides to set out to prove that. So he uses some science and he competes in a maze. He may not win that maze contest, as the maze race is to choose which rat will go up into space. But he does find his way up there, and he gets hold of a camera, and he's collecting video evidence for his YouTube channel. So he conducts experiments on the humans unbeknownst to them. And he finds another rat up there that he becomes friends with after a poor start to a friendship, but they do become friends. Together, they work on proving that rats should be the species to colonize Mars. But of course, things go wrong.
As you mentioned, this is a book for young people, and you've written a lot of books for young readers. What is it that you enjoy about writing for this age group?
I enjoy writing for this age group, I think, because it's just so fun. I can go into a place in my head where I can imagine things that aren't necessarily believable. I can make things up. I can take the science and I can make it understandable for kids in this age group. That's just very satisfying for me, to introduce kids to things that I'm intensely curious about and be able to present it in ways that get them engaged as well. I think I fell in love with books, as a child. Something about that just draws me to it.
Well, you were well versed in science because of a lot of the writing you do even before this book, but tell us a bit about the research that applies to this book.
Well, I did extensive research. I originally wrote the book as a nonfiction title called Living in Space. I went to a SEEK conference, a Space Educators Conference in Houston at NASA, and I was able to go behind the scenes and see things like the Orion capsule, which will be used to house astronauts on the Artemis mission that's going to the moon. And then I went to Cape Canaveral in Florida to see a SpaceX Falcon Heavy liftoff. And I was able to go on astronaut-led tours and ask questions and do really in-depth research. And so I wrote my book and sent it off. I was working with an agent at this time who was sending it out for me. And I kept getting asked to rewrite it. They loved the character Mortimer and they wanted more. They wanted either a novel or a picture book. And so I decided to take the challenge and try and write the story as a novel. And it was tricky. I had to put away my Living in Space book and start fresh because I could only include the science that moved the story forward. My background is actually in biological sciences, and I've written 24 books. Some have stories. Most of them are science related, except for my adult books. So I had to really pick which science I could include. And that was a challenge for me. So the process was starting fresh, very carefully weaving my science in that was essential to the story.
Now, besides being a fun read, what do you hope that young readers will take from this novel?
I hope they take away that science is for everyone and that science is important because a lot of the spin-offs that come from space exploration benefit our daily lives. Things like Invisalign braces has to do with things that were created for space exploration, or our cell phones and so much of our technology. A lot of things that were created for space exploration are things that we depend on in our lives. They help, people in all kinds of medical research and things. There's a lot of tie-ins, but I think I want kids to appreciate the wonder in our world and that our environment doesn't actually stop at the top of the trees. It goes up into space and beyond, and people are living and exploring space. It's a frontier, there's a lot of unknowns, and it's fascinating to see what scientists are doing. So I hope they take away that and maybe a little more respect for rats.
This novel is Mortimer, Rat Race to Space. And Joan, I want to ask you a question that I frequently ask authors of fiction. If you could spend a day in real life with one of the characters you created for this novel, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I would want to spend some time with Boris. Boris is a Cosmo rat on the International Space Station. He's never been to Earth. He was born in space, so his perspectives are quite unique. If I could go up onto the space station, I would have lots of questions for him.
You, as we've talked about, have done a lot of research and have, kept up with what's happening with the space program. What's going on now with space missions that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen with the Artemis mission and the plan to eventually reach Mars. When I first heard about, going to Mars, I thought, well, how are they going to do this? This seems utterly impossible. It's a 6-month trip one way. How are people going to stay sane? How are they going to physically survive? And then I did my research, and I was at NASA and I was going on all these astronaut-led tours, and I came away with the certainty that we are going to reach Mars. It was commonly believed that you would never get to the moon at one point. Humankind has gotten to the moon, so there's no reason actually to think that we can't keep achieving and create the science that's needed to go deeper into space.
So now that you've got Mortimer's story out there, what's next for you?
Well, I would love to continue Mortimer's story or do another about exploring, characters exploring space and maybe getting to the moon on the way to Mars. That's most likely in my future, but I do have some other commitments. I'm writing a book right now on activism, and it's for kids also ages 8 to 12, and it's about how kids can tackle the causes that they care about. We often feel helpless when we see injustice in the world and we don't know where to start. And that's true for adults as well as for kids. But I'm writing a book for ages 8 to 12 on that topic. I have a book coming out in the spring. It's called Too Much Trash, How Litter is Hurting Animals. And it's about the problem of basically litter on the ground, litter in the oceans, and how it impacts wildlife, pets, and farm animals.
Well, all right. We'll look forward to that. This current novel is for middle grade readers. It's Mortimer, Rat Race to Space by Joan Marie Galat. Joan, thank you very much for talking with me today.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You'll find more interviews on a wide variety of topics at kansaspublicradio.org/conversations. You can use the KPR app to listen to the latest episodes on your phone or tablet, and you'll also find us on Facebook. Conversations is a production of Kansas Public Radio. I'm Dan Skenner. Thanks for listening.